Okay, so good evening. A few people are just connecting, so welcome to today's lesson. And we're going to be looking at some of the last sections of leading people and managing people. So first of all, if you've got to this section of your workbook and you are doing this alongside, that's great. If you're learning this now, but you're thinking, I haven't seen this yet in the workbooks, don't worry, it will come into it really soon. So make notes. Let's go with the flow and see how we can work from there. So as ever, it's going to be a very short and snappy session to get to the point of the knowledge that you need. And then the rest can be additional reading, which you can go into your workbooks. Now, just to recap what we've done in the other live sessions, this is the third one. We've looked at leadership and management styles. We've looked at the strengths and the weaknesses of different leadership and management styles. And we've also then looked at motivation in the last session, how to develop a team. We looked at the forming, norming, storming sections of the team. So in this session, we're just going to touch upon different types of team again. The main objective then is going to go into coaching and mentoring. So that's really what we're going to get out of this. And this is going to support the knowledge within your actual workbooks. But first of all, let's go back to the team and what we've spoken about, kind of like finishing off in the last session. Within general practice, there can be lots of different teams in the practice itself. Predominantly, you're going to have operational teams or role-specific teams, right? This could be your general administration team. This could be your reception team. You know, they have a specific operation, okay? Or a goal in mind. I mean, within general practice as well, you're going to have management teams, the clinical team, who you'll be communicating to as well as a practice manager. It's becoming quite common now that you may be working with a separate surgery, whether this is through a merger or something's happened which has brought two surgeries working together. So it's important to understand, first of all, that when you're managing different teams, you can be looking at virtual or remote teams. And chances are, as we go further into the future, this is an area which is going to be developed a lot more, not just in general practice, but in other organizations at the same time. Virtual remote teams. So a remote team is basically when you have these people working in different parts of the country or the world, you're going to have to be leading them and teaching them from a distance. You know, you could have two surgeries which you could be working with already, and you're having to work remotely with them. I've had to remote manage a team before based in a different country. So you kind of have to use different leadership styles within that. First of all, I mean, the organizational culture between two general practices may be completely different. And as a leader within the surgery, you're going to have to understand that. The way that you do things in your organization or in your surgery may be different to someone else's. And that's something you have to think of. I always say it's really important to look at the Tetra map model. Now, I should have sent this out to you already. If you've not, drop me an email at the very end. Tetra map, it's like an organizational psychology thing. You would get the team to complete their Tetra map assessment. It's usually like a multiple choice quizzes. And at the end of it, it will dictate whether they fall into four elements, which can be earth, wind, water, or fire. Now, the interesting thing for you when you're doing this exercise is that knowing what element they are, earth, air, water, or fire, will help you understand how you're going to communicate to them, how you're going to be with them in a one-to-one appraisal or anything, those situations, even to what shift you might put them on, because your chances are you're not going to put too many fiery fires in the same shift, right? You've got to even the balance out. How this helps you as a leader when you're remote working is you should be able to understand from the feedback and the quiz tests which have come back from this, how a different surgery might be operating. And you've got to understand that as a leader, you've then got to work in a different way, okay? There's going to be a lot of conflict management in there, which is something we're going to come across later on within the course. But you may have to understand how you're going to adapt your leadership. Remember, we had democratic, autocratic, laissez-faire, cultural, transformational. transactional. If you haven't seen those, they're in my first live class, which you can look back to. It's understanding how you're going to adapt yourself, and you've got to adapt yourself to the setting, okay? And when you're doing a remote situation and you start to work with another surgery, the organization culture may be different. It may have stemmed from the way the manager did things prior to you. Now, you can't suddenly change things overnight, because that's going to cause a lot of issues and a lot of conflict. And we will be coming into that into another unit. But I want you to start thinking at this stage is how you can approach this, how you can change this without doing a full change management plan. And understanding the elements of that is quite key. And understanding the team dynamics, who are the fiery ones and who are not, is going to be key. And that's where coaching and mentoring is going to come in, which I'm going to talk to you about in a moment. But there's also a model about informal leaders. Now, I can drop you the link to this as well. Informal leaders are those people that work in the organization who don't have an official leadership title or a management title on their badge, but they have a predominant character. Interestingly, a lot of managers fear these informal leaders. They see them as a threat. I know when I was a manager, I could say I did the same thing. I felt the same things. What you've got to be able to understand as a manager is how you can understand their characteristics, especially if you're trying to change a culture with a remote team working in a different practice or surgery, right? You've got to understand who these people are. There's going to be people like, in the model, there are networkers. So these are the people that communicate a lot more. They're good to get on your side. Get them involved with your vision, and they will spread the vision's goals a lot further. You've got examplers. So these are the people that set a good example. You want them on your side as well. And within the informal leaders, you've also got the early adopters. These are the people that are very willing to change. Now, get one of those people on board. They could be a key character, maybe within the reception or the administration team. And then from that, you'll be able to sort of get the trust going, building the trust and transparency through and through. That's really what you need to do as a leader. I always say, you know, whatever teams you're working in, building trust and transparency is key. How much transparency you give away is completely up to you. You know, as a manager, you have to be careful about certain information and various things like that. But definitely building trust. The art of delegation and empowerment are often very key to this. You know, you delegate to people's skill set, but start to think, rather than just delegating key tasks, could you actually be empowering someone to do it in the first place? Empowerment is a powerful thing. When people are empowered to do something, it's almost like they have been given this extra responsibility and they start to take more pride in the work. Interestingly, in a psychology method, you know, getting maybe more of a fiery character within the organization, some empowerment may keep them more stimulated to take them away from the problem or the conflict which might be happening within the actual team. So there are some key things which you've got to think about in that one. I think understanding these models and definitely going back to the theory is good. But, you know, rather than just delegate, I want you to think about that empowerment and what people could go and do. Are they empowered to do something? I remember when I was managing, not in a surgery, but this is a good transferable skill. We had a lot of issues with service in a hospitality travel sector. Very often, like with any customer service, you know, if something happened, we would have got them to write in and complain, and we would have fixed it there and then. We changed that model. We gave the team the empowerment to give out the compensation there and then, which kept the customer happy. The team felt like they had authority. They feel like they're a manager, you know, even though they're not, but that's the power of it. It really does prove motivationally great to do that. And well, it freed you of time as a manager. As a manager, I'd suddenly stopped going through all these complaints procedures and various other things. And I had time to actually focus on building the team, creating and making sure we're hitting the key performance indicators, the goals and the objectives of the organization. So definitely start to look at those delegation and empowerment models, and they are featured within your actual workbooks. Well, that leads us very nicely into the section of coaching and mentoring, which is what I really wanted to get to you today. So we've looked at the different types of teams, how you're going to move them forward, how you're going to grow with the teams. Coaching and mentoring. If you're a mentor, you're kind of telling someone what to do. You're giving them suggestions. You're their right-hand man or woman, you know. You're driving them more forward in a way. If you're coaching them, you're trying to get the information from them. Like, the team member knows their answer, okay? But they need to be dug a little bit deeper. They need to understand. So don't get coaching and mentoring confused. As a leader, you could fit very well between coaching and mentoring in different styles. There may be sessions where you're sat mentoring someone, guiding them through a process of how to complete an online form. But if you want to get the art of intrinsic motivation, that self-motivation, that desire, then you want to have the coaching involved, where you're getting the team to think. Because when people think, they become more innovative, they become more productive. You know, you're getting them away from the ticking of the boxes and crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's, right? And you're starting to make them become more, actually, let's have a look at doing it this way. You know, you could say it forms creative thinking, critical thinking. Creative thinking, you know, we need to get more of that into the organization. Far too many times we follow the procedures, which is good, right? Because we have to have a standardized way of working. It sets the standards, whether it's for a CQC process or anything like that. But we need to have times where the team could be maybe thinking, well, why are we doing it like that? Can we change that? Maybe for a brainstorming session that they might do with you. But you need to have some coaching techniques. Now, I'm going to go through 3 coaching models which you could start to think about and apply, and there is more knowledge of this within the ILM workbooks which we've already given you. So the first popular one, and I know, excuse my writing, is the GROW model. So GROW stands for goal, reality, options, and will. So if you were following a model very similar to this with GROW, goal, what is the goal? So when you're sitting with the person, what's the goal? Is it the problem of way they're handling the telephone calls? Is it the way they're passing information on prescriptions over, following up on patients' leads? Anything like that? What's the goal? And remember, when you're doing a coaching model, you need to get that information out of the person. You know, you're setting the goals. So this could be on a key performance indicator, an appraisal sheet, various other things. Reality, setting the steps. Okay, so the goal is we need to really look at the way we're handling complaints on the phone systems coming into general practice. Reality, how are we going to do that? Is there a stepping stone that we're going to complete next week, the week after that, and various other things? Options, how can we do this? Is it an actual formal training session, or me getting this out of the coaching session to you? Is it something where I could maybe partner you with someone in the organization who is willing to help you? Obviously, use up that one at your own discretion. Sometimes people feel a bit embarrassed and uncomfortable, and you know, I never like forcing a team member to go in and do something. Is it something that they don't want really the other team members to know? So it's something that you could just do more personally, one-to-one, without other people knowing. So options, how are you going to do it? And will, how are you going to commit to the process? And I would say, to get the will of the person involved, you're going to maybe set a goal, like we're going to review it next week, you're going to sign this. Even though it's a coaching session, it's good to have something where you can set out key bullet points and get them to sign it, okay? It shows that there's commitment, you know, because people have this mentality that when they sign a document, it's like signing a contract. It's like, oh yeah, we did do it. It becomes a little bit more official. Interestingly, when I was a manager and I used to do disciplinaries, even though it got the verbal warning, I still used to type out the notes and get the person to sign for it, even though it's verbal, right? And I think, yeah, it's sitting things in line. When people sign a document, it sounds a bit more serious, and that's when you're getting the will of the person to come back into it. So that was the GROW model, okay? So goals, setting the goals of the team member. What's the reality? Is it realistic to have this completed? The options, what are they? And how you're going to get the will of the person involved at the same time. That leads me very nicely on to another one. So sorry about the bits of paper in this. On this one, we're going to look at a CLEAR model. Again, these are all in your actual workbook. So contracting, listening, exploring, action, review. This is where I like this model a lot more, because this is really more about coaching compared to the grow model. And C, contracting. How do you want to use your time? Okay, when you start off and you're with the person, you're asking questions. Well, what is the problem? This is what I mean. This is what coaching is. This is what makes coaching different to mentoring. You're getting the problem from them. What is your problem? You know, what is the problem? Why is the current system on working the phones and reception not working? How do you want to use your time more wisely? You know, you're using very open-ended questions. And as you're doing that, you can be writing notes down, and you can be starting to work with the person a lot more. And listening, you know, that's an interesting thing. People hear a lot, but they don't listen. You know, listening is where you're writing things down. At the end of it, you summarize. And this is a good skill to have when you're effectively maybe dealing with complaints and other things at the same time. So to listen, to summarize. So you've got what the problem is. You're now trying to summarize it. You're scribbling things down at the same time. You're sort of suggesting, so you're saying this, you're thinking this. Yeah. And you're kind of starting to think, yeah, this is the problem. What are we going to do? And now this is where it gets really interesting. On the E, it stands for exploring. And this can come in two different parts. Exploring is when you start to really get into it. So this is where your questions may be like, so when you doesn't go well, how are you feeling? Or, okay, so we've given you training on how to effectively answer the phones, but it obviously hasn't worked. What's going through your mind when you pick up the phone and you answer it? Is it nerves? Is it feeling? You know, you're really getting to the bottom of what the problem is. Now, this can be really interesting as a manager, because not only are you getting the person to solve their problem, it might open your eyes up a lot more to what's happening in the team. They may be just simply nervous around other team members. There may be some conflict within the team. So the exploring stage is actually really interesting. Does this situation remind you of, you know, why has it not been done? Why have you changed it? Explore, really, you know, live to that E, explore, write things down. So then when you've got the exploring, you can go into A, action. So that's when you start to set a plan. And we've talked about it in other videos, and we will do with other key areas of the book in the future. But this is where you start to set a SMART plan. SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time. Now, I think that also was in your workbook, but if you've not come across that yet, we will go into that. Setting actions, visit SMART, be specific. What is the actual problem? Measurable, how we're going to measure it every week. Achievable, yes. Realistic, yes. Review, R, we're going to review it in 1 week and then in 2 weeks, and see from there. And use the CLEAR model on a continuous basis. Because again, you're getting to the gist of the problem, and it's going to help you nip the problems at the bud in what actually might be happening in your team. You know, with the team that you're working with. But yeah, it's going back to the team models. You know, you might take on another team in another surgery, which you're not based in. You don't know what problems are going on there all the time, you know. So you're exploring, you're really, you know, you've got that inspector hat on, and you're trying to dig a lot more deeper. Now, the other coaching model that we're just going to look at, and again, which is in your workbook, apologies because you can't see it very well. I'm trying to recycle paper, be good to the planet. OSCAR, so this stands for outcome, situation, choices and consequences, action and review. So this is where you're kind of setting the outcome first, okay? I want you to effectively build and develop your way of supporting the patients on the phone. The current situation looks a little bit like this. You're kind of telling the person this. However, I want it to look a little bit more like this in a way. You're setting clear action and you're reviewing. You'll notice in all three models, the action and the review is critical. You know, if it's not written down into a coaching plan and a mentoring plan, people won't stick to it, and you want to get to the bottom of the main problem of what is going on. Still to this day, that clear model is the one that I would always use. Now, just to kind of summarize, what would you do if you are going into a few pointers if you're doing a coaching session with the team? So you're going to make sure that you're going to have short and open questions. They don't work, okay? They need to be open. You need to really explore and dig deep into it. Your questions need to be aimed at the progress, what's going on, how you're going to change it. You need to ask probing questions. Remember, especially if it's the remote team that you're doing the session with. And remember, coaching doesn't just have to happen face to face. It's up to us as leaders and managers to empathize technology. It's really hard to use it on the phone because you're listening and you're not seeing the emotional face-to-face contact. But, you know, Skype sessions, FaceTime sessions, we need to emphasize that use of technology. You need to give plenty of time for the person to think, especially when you're going through that clear model. You know, you give them a question and people hate silence, right? So very often you'll be like, yeah, you'll give pointers and help. No, thing to remember here, like in negotiation, actually, silence is golden. Give them time, because if you rush them, they won't give you the honest answer. They'll give you the first thing that's coming to their head, which won't be the problem which you're trying to solve. It won't be as honest as an answer. And offer goal setting. So set the goals and always get feedback from them. You know, coaching is very often a two-way process. You need this feedback to say, is it working for you, or do we need to move on to something else? If it's not working, scrap it straight away. It might work with some people, other people, you know, going back to the style of person who they are, the Tetra map, earth, air, water, fire, might just need a different style of support, more mentoring, less coaching. You know, if I went in and said to my person, yeah, this is what we're going to do, they'll be like, oh, that's too fluffy. On to the fact, all right? It's down to the person how you're going to do it. And the last thing that I'm going to sort of finish on, really, we've gone through all these different coaching models, which is great. But looking at the push-pull strategy, really, this is what sort of defines what coaching and mentoring is. Push, if you are a leader, this is when you're providing the solution. So you'd say that's much more often as a mentoring thing. You're saying what's wrong. You're saying this is the answer. This is how you're going to help them. Pull, okay, is that they're solving the problem on their own. So this is where the coaching comes in and people can really get it out of them. Personally, coaching is great because you get to understand the person a lot more, especially with the more probing questions. I would say as a leader, always go in with questions pre-written out, a bank of questions, right? Because you can use them in many different occasions. You really need to emphasize that E on the exploring stage and really move forward from that. So again, I know this has been a very short and sweet session, but this is where we're going to go with it. You've now got 3 live videos on the units of leading and managing people. Some of the stuff that I've spoken about in this session may not be relevant to what you're going through now, but it will be coming up in your workbooks and other parts of the unit first. So just to recover the key objectives that we've gone through, I went through a run through of the different team models in your organization. Again, I explained differences between coaching and mentoring. We looked at the coaching models of Grow, Clear, Oscar. We just did a brief summary of really what push and pull is, which is in your workbooks. And I sort of explained how to use things like Tetra map to understand the team dynamics in the organization. So these are things that we are going to go through in the face-to-face sessions as well when I see you next time. But I just wanted to end the session on a quote, because sometimes as a leader, okay, you might be implementing new things and you might be thinking, is it going to work? Is it not going to work? You've got to make it happen. And there's this great quote, which this is one of my old business cards. I love the quote so much, I put it on the back of my business card. It's from Steve Jobs. And it's the people who think they're crazy enough to change the world are the ones that might just do it. Yeah, so if you're crazy enough to implement these systems of coaching, redefine the leadership, the organizational culture, then you will do it and you will succeed. So don't forget to drop me a message and a line. You've got my email. I'll put links below, and keep in touch. Let me know how things are getting on, and I'll see you face to face or the next time we're live on YouTube Live.